Hi, I'm Avi. I'm an English teacher working with professionals. In this podcast, I share ideas and observations about communication, confidence, and speaking English in professional environments. So, whenever people ask me what I do for a living, and I say that I'm an English teacher, there is a comment that almost always follows. People usually say something like, "Oh, yes, I studied English, I understand a lot, I can read, I can listen." But when it comes to speaking, I just can't. And what's interesting is that many of these people have actually studied English for years. They've taken courses, they've used apps, they've gone to classes. However, they still feel like they are not ready to speak. And very often they say something like, "I need to feel more confident first." And this is where I think there is a misunderstanding because many people think confidence is a feeling, something that appears before you start doing something else. But in reality, confidence rarely works that way. In most cases, confidence is the result of repetition, doing something again and again and again until your brain stops treating it as something unfamiliar. To be honest, repetition can feel boring. There is nothing particularly exciting about repeating the same type of conversation many times. However, the boredom is actually a very important signal. It means you're starting to enter what we usually call the comfort zone. And the comfort zone is not a place where something is easy. It's a place where you've repeated something so many times that you no longer need to think about how to do it. You simply do it. And that's usually the moment when confidence finally appears. Not before, not after. Let's talk about the problem professionals face. This is something I see very often with professionals, with my students. Many of them are extremely competent in their fields. They manage teams, they make strategic decisions, they lead projects. However, when they have to communicate in English, the experience feels the experience suddenly feels very different. They start monitoring every word they say, they start thinking about grammar, they start translating in their heads. And because of that, speaking feels slow, uncomfortable, and stressful. So naturally, people start waiting. They wait until their English is better. They wait until they feel ready. But the problem is that readiness rarely comes first. Practice comes first. So let's talk about repetition and how it changes the brain. When you repeat something many times, something interesting happens. Your brain stops treating the task as something new. Instead, it starts recognizing patterns. You no longer need to think about every single word. You start producing language more automatically. And this is the same process we see in many other skills: driving, playing an instrument, teaching a class. At the beginning, everything requires conscious effort. But after enough repetition, the process becomes more natural. Language works in exactly the same way. There is a different way to think about expertise. A student once told me something that I think explains this idea very well. She's actually a teacher herself and a very good student. She's brilliant. And she told me that she often repeats something to her own students that one of her professors once told her. So we're passing the message. Her professor said, "Of course, I know a lot about this topic. I've spent years studying it. This is my field. I've repeated this material many times and I've been exposed to it for years." And then she added something very simple. "But this is the first time for you." I think that's a very important reminder. Experts are not confident because they are naturally better. They are confident because they are confident because they've spent years repeating the same ideas, thinking about the same concepts, and working with the same material again and again. And when you understand that, the gap between beginners and experts suddenly looks very different. Very often, it's simply a matter of exposure and repetition over time. However, repetition doesn't mean doing random exercises forever. It means practicing specific situations many times. For example, introducing yourself in a meeting, or giving a short update on a project, explaining a problem, asking for clarification. These situations appear again and again in professional environments. And interestingly, the questions that seem the simplest the the most difficult ones to answer. There are two questions I see all the time that people struggle with. One is, what's new in your life? And the other one is, tell me about yourself, which technically is not even a question. And yet many people freeze when they hear it. When someone asks, what's new? We often respond with something like, nothing much, or everything is normal. But in reality, our lives are not empty. We just haven't practiced how to talk about them. And the same thing happens with tell me about yourself. People often answer with very basic information: their age, their job title, maybe their hobbies, sometimes their marital status. And if those things completely defined it, as, as if as if those things completely define who they are. But the real reason we don't know what to say is very simple. We've never practiced that answer. And this is important, especially in professional contexts. If you're preparing for a job interview in English, you're not supposed to improvise. An interview is an evaluation. An interview is an evaluation. You are expected to come prepared, which means thinking in advance about the information you want to share, how you want to structure it, how you want to say it. Sometimes I even recommend practicing in front of a mirror, paying attention to your hand gestures, your body language, your pacing, because speaking with confidence is not only about language, it's also about delivery. And repetition is what allows all of those elements to come together naturally. So, if you feel that speaking English still feels uncomfortable, try to look at it from a different perspective. Maybe the problem is not your level. Maybe the problem is not your intelligence. And maybe it's not even confidence. It might simply be that you haven't repeated the situation enough times yet. Because confidence is rarely something that appears first. Most of the time, confidence is the result of repetition, of doing the same thing again and again until your brain no longer sees it as something unfamiliar, until you no longer have to think so much about how to do it. You simply do it. So the next time you find yourself waiting to feel confident before speaking, try reversing the order. Speak first, repeat the experience, and let confidence appear later. So, before we finish, here are three questions you might want to think about this week, because the teacher in me cannot just let you go without homework. First, what speaking situation in English appears regularly in your professional life? A meeting update, introducing yourself, explaining a problem, you choose. Second, how many times have you actually practiced that situation? 5 times? 10 times? 100? If a musician was about to perform on a stage, we wouldn't expect them to play a song they've never practiced before. They would rehearse it many times. So, why would we expect ourselves to do the same thing in a professional conversation in English? To consider. And third, what would happen if instead of waiting to feel confident, you simply started repeating the situation more often? See you next time.